So, hello everybody, and welcome to our webinar on how to perform an internal audit. My name is Robert Crosby and I've been working for QMS for 5 years now, and I specialise in information security 27001, quality 9001, environment 14001 and health and safety 45001, amongst others. If anybody thinks that they may have a question as we're running through the webinar today, please feel free to ask those questions, and you can submit those questions by clicking in the question mark chat box on the right hand side of your page, I believe. You can write your question in there, and what I will generally do is I will run through the webinar. You may actually ask some questions, and I may actually even answer them as I go through the webinar anyway, but please don't be frightened to ask any questions. It is one of my favourite parts of the webinar, and what I will do is when we come to the end of the webinar, we will open the floor, and my kind moderator, will supply me with some questions that you may have sent in. As I say, it is one of my favourite parts of the webinar, so do not be afraid to ask those questions, and hopefully everybody will get a maximum amount of benefit from the webinar today. And right, how to perform an internal audit. So some of the things that we're going to look at in today's webinar is what actually is an internal audit, how can an internal audit help you as your business to confirm compliance to a particular management system standard, what are the different types of audit that people may be exploring that are using in their own organizations, and then we're going to deep dive into some of the detail around that, and that'll include planning audits, picking a team for the audit, actually carrying out an audit, how you record the results, and as I've indicated earlier, the question and answer session will follow from that. So what is an internal audit? So if nobody's ever had any experience of an internal audit, it is basically a check of your management system and its associated procedures, to understand whether you are actually compliant with the standard, your chosen standard, and also whether you're compliant with some of the internal procedures that you use in your organization. It will include, obviously, coverage of the management system that you may or may not have at the moment, or even that you're actually going for, because initially some organizations may carry out an initial stage 1 audit, and effectively they may do that through an external source like Citation ISO certification, or they may choose to do that obviously themselves, if they feel as though they obviously can manage that process and they have the skills in the organization to do that. One other useful feature of an audit, it is a way to ensure that your internal processes and procedures are being followed as expected. Internal audit checks that your processes are accurately documented, correctly implemented, and effectively maintained. So really, it's a spot check, isn't it, on some of the things that your organization generally do on a day-to-day basis, to see whether that the outcomes that you're expecting to achieve are being achieved as planned. The benefits of auditing effectively can check many areas of your business. Many businesses deliver processes, for example, for customer services, for example. It will aim to check whether your overall organizational goals are being achieved, and also your management system goals and improvements. It can improve communication and understanding of the business processes themselves, and it can also allow various people within your organization to get involved in that process so that they can help the wider business manage their processes and activities to ensure that things are going, as I said, according to plan. It can also allow organizations to develop their own training tools, not just for internal auditing, but it can also perhaps spot things that may be going out of kilter, which could allow organizations to indicate that they may need some additional resource or some additional time, or to even implement some additional training in certain areas if the business is finding problems in a particular area. Generally, any management system audit is there to ensure that any planned arrangements are being followed, are being maintained, and a common theme that you will find is that the organization is achieving expected outcomes. So, for example, most organizations want to deliver their service delivery activities to their clients error-free, at the right price, at the right time. And again, a management system standard like ISO 9001 concentrates on that particular aspect of a business. It can also provide feedback to the supervisors and also senior management team that those processes that have been set up are effective. And again, it can identify where those processes may be not as effective as they should be, so that we can put measures in place to correct that and improve that going forward. And for other management systems that may be in place, like health and safety and the environment, it can help you to check that those environmental considerations are actually being met. And it can also identify where deviations may be creating the organization problems as well. So some of the principles of auditing are illustrated on the actual screen, as you can see there. So when think about auditing there are certain principles that are very useful to sort of understand. And if you undertake auditing yourself, some of these key categories that you see on screen there are very, very crucial in making sure that their audits are being run effectively, and they're also beneficial to your organization. So fair presentation, confidentiality for security of information, GDPR, things like that. Independence. So it may be that you carry out an internal audit, and it may be the purchasing process that you're actually, or the purchasing team that you're auditing. Some organizations choose to take supervisors from different areas, for example, warehouse, stores, and they will essentially help them to undertake a management system audit, almost somebody stepping outside of the normal realm of who operates this process, so it can act as an independent check. Evidence-based approach is a key important consideration of auditing. Most audit reports, if anybody has had experience of auditing or is getting into auditing, one of the key things that an audit report will deliver, it will report on the checks that you've done, and it also report on the evidence that you've found during those checks. And that's what we'll explore later as well. Dual professional care. So we all want to be treated with professionalism, with dual care. The business wants to know that if an audit's carried out, there's impartiality in there as well, and also integrity. So there are many sort of principles in there and nuances when auditing is carried out, but those are some of the main principles that people should be considering when they're undertaking auditing, or at least hoping to implement a plan for internal auditing. There can be 4 aspects to auditing, so the types of auditing that's carried out. Some organizations may choose to carry out a system audit. Some organizations might choose to carry out a process audit on their operational processes, for example. A product audit might specifically look at a particular product or the development of a product, for example. And also we have project audits as well. So these various aspects of auditing, they can effectively be delivered. They can help you deliver an internal audit in a particular way, and we're going to explore some of those as we progress. So a system audit is effectively looking at your management system, and essentially it can be focusing on the clauses of the standard. Different organizations may operate their management systems in a particular way. Some organizations have a process-based approach, some will run that clause-based approach, and a system audit is essentially a check of the standard to make sure that the key principles identified throughout all of the management system standard is operating as expected. So effectively, the standard tells us that we have certain goals and requirements to achieve. The system audit will allow an organization to run through that chronologically and actually see that all those elements of that particular management system standard is being adhered to. And just to give everybody a bit of extra information, there are different standards like the 14,001 for environment and the 27,001 for information security. They will have different elements within it. So effectively, that system audit will make sure that all those criteria, no matter what standard you're looking at, is being looked at and assessed. A process-based audit approach is more practical based. It will look at your processes and procedures. For example, an operational control process might include several clauses that are grouped together. So while everybody's doing their day-to-day activities, in terms of operations, it might be customer inquiries that you're looking at. It might be how you process those inquiries, how you proceed with those inquiries in order for it to be created as an order for your organization so that you can help deliver those products and services to clients. It might also look at how your emergency control is managed within the organization. It also might look at how your actual service delivery activities are carried out. So when we think about service delivery, it might be individual procedures, how a particular project's delivered to a client, how, for example, a maintenance organization delivers that maintenance activity for a site-based client. So a process audit, again, can help organizations group several clauses together and just by actually watching what the organization does, just by understanding and following and making sure that people within the organization are carrying out their activities correctly, a process-based audit may achieve the internal audit, help you to achieve that internal audit. A project audit is pretty much exactly what it says. Different organizations might have projects set up for various reasons. And by following a typical project from start to finish, you may find that the management system clauses, for example, are all being addressed through that. So, for example, in order for us to generate a project, have we got the need for a project? Have we got a customer that wants it? Have we got an inquiry that's generated this project to go ahead? Have we then made sure that that customer or potential customer has set up a payment plan in order for you to progress with that project? What are some of the key features of that project? Are you developing new products? Are you delivering a bespoke product to a client? And again, a project-based audit will have various criteria within it in order for the organization to confirm to the client that all the requirements of that particular project has been met. And as I say, project audits can be wide ranging. It can be new product development. It can be delivering a construction project to a particular client or site. It can even be installation of electrical systems into a manufacturing plant, for example, that requires it to be done in a set period of time, looking at time plans, etc. So all these elements that feed into this project can generally be audited through a management system. Generally, when we think about project audits, we would be looking at 9001 standard for quality, but it also might be relevant if you're delivering an IT project into an organization. So, for example, a 27001 management system may be beneficial for clients to carry out a project audit on their 27001 management system to make sure some of those critical informational security issues and concerns are being addressed and delivered throughout that project. A product audit may be, for example, aligned to an organization making a food product or even a retail product. For a chair, for example, different clients might require different chairs, different clients might require different types of foods, chocolate bars, cakes, for example. So the product audit will look at your organization and how that product's made, how it's actually manufactured, and then how it's actually packaged and then delivered to clients, providing that there's obviously customer orders in for that client. So you can see by the different types of audits, you can actually approach your internal audits in slightly different ways. So some of the key elements of any internal audit is audit preparation. There's generally a reason why we need to do a management system audit. And organizations will have many reasons for that, whether it's for checking for compliance against a management system standard. It might be that you think that your internal processes are running very well and you're looking for improvements. It may be the fact that you are carrying out management systems audits as a result of failures in the past. So what all you're essentially doing is rechecking that some of the actions that you may have put in to circumvent some of those firefighting activities, for example, are actually working for you. So it can effectively, there are many reasons why you may need an audit, and some audits, as I say, may be carried out more frequently than others, depending on previous history of the organization, failures, or even successes. Because even when we've got successes, organizations are striving for improvement, and essentially every management system that I generally work with, focusing on continuous improvement, looking at how you can improve what you do, saving costs, time, increasing efficiencies. So again, purpose is one of the key factors in audit preparation. Generally speaking, now we're getting into the actual audit preparation activities. Some organizations will have to generate an audit schedule. But some organizations choose to do audits within a very close space of time. Some organizations, for various reasons, may choose to spread that audit schedule over a greater period of time. So maybe over a 12-month period. Any organizations, for example, that are either thinking of going for 27001 information security or even implementing it, they will know that there's many clauses within it, and in order for them to be able to audit and resource that audit, they'll spread that over a 3-year period. So having an audit schedule is quite important because it sets the roadmap for what you want to achieve and when you want to achieve those audits themselves. And it's also a good way of communicating to the management team, supervisors and staff that there are going to be auditing activities being carried out at set and defined times. So when will the audit start and finish? Quite important, because organizations need to know who's going to be available for that audit. You know, what is, for example, if you're doing a product audit, is the organization producing that product during the time of that audit? So again, what time the start and finish times of the audit is quite important, because it sets that boundary by which you're looking at a particular process or activity within your organization. And have you allocated yourself enough time to conduct and also document that audit? If, for example, you're reviewing operational procedures as part of it, it will take probably a bit more time than just observing employees doing a particular activity. So researching some of this even beforehand might be useful. So all this is now starting to build in some of the main principles of what you need to consider when you're thinking about auditing. Resources is a very important aspect on here. Timing, as I've mentioned before, how much time are you going to have available? Who needs to be involved? Are the right people involved and available at that particular time? Because it could be quite frustrating if, for example, you're auditing your purchasing activities and nobody from the purchasing team is available to do it, because you'll find that you'll probably struggle, which generally might mean that you need to replan that audit. Has the auditor been trained to carry out that audit? Have they got previous experience? So that's an important factor. You know, do we have knowledgeable people available that can assist with that process? What equipment's required? Do you, for example, use clipboards? Do you use iPads or tablets and smart devices? For example, is there going to be particular equipment that's available there so that you can check the calibration of that equipment, for example? So, for example, these are all some very good examples of what most organizations will need to consider during audit preparation activities. I know I touched on this earlier, but we can explore this in a little bit of more detail there. Creating a schedule for your audit, it sets the plan of what you want to achieve over the next 12 months. It also will allow you to ensure that through that plan, you're executing all of the internal audits and the relevant to either your internal processes, procedures, or clauses of the management system standard. If we can think of like the diagram, the simple diagram on there, think of a matrix or a calendar, for example, whereby you have all your management system elements and procedures that you want to look at down the left-hand column, and across the top, horizontally across the top column, you may have January, February, March, April, May, and so on for the 12-month period. Once you have a blank matrix in there or an audit schedule, you can almost then plug in and color in the bits of where you want to plan. And you can stagger that throughout the year. Most management system standards require you to plan these audits and to have evidence of that. So first of all, planning it and then recording that plan. Again, it is generally a requirement of most management system standards. So having that plan there, not only are you meeting the requirements of the standards in most cases, you're also in a position then for you to follow that plan, and the management team also knows some of the activities that are going to be involved when executing those internal audits on the shop floor, within the offices, etc. It may be that you have in the previous 3 months or 6 months identified some areas within your offices or even production areas that you've had failures. You might have had many accidents. So what the audit plan will allow you to do is, it might be that you don't just check one of these areas once a year. It might be that you put in your audit plan that you check it twice a year, or even more frequently if you've been having more serious problems or accidents. If, for example, in previous audits you have encountered any non-conformities, that might be a focal point whereby you've put in corrective actions and you're happy with it, but you just want to double check just to make sure that everybody's still doing what we said we aim to do, and that they're implementing those improvements. So you can use that as a secondary check for instances, as I say, where you've had shortfalls. And again, the internal audit schedule can be adapted. It may be that through holiday periods and around Christmas that you can't undertake audits, so you actually have to plan your audits, within the sort of the first few months of the year and do extra audits. It may be that you actually in January you audit something, you find some serious problems, and then you just add another audit into maybe July, August, just again for that recheck. So that allows the organization to adapt their plans and to ensure that they're rechecking all those key areas. Ultimately, what we're aiming for there, not only for a check that everything's going according to plan, that if you have had any errors there, that you're not continually getting those errors. An internal audit is a brilliant way of checking those. So this is where things start getting quite exciting. And I'm going to cover some examples of some typical audits. So on screen here, just to give everybody some oversight onto the right-hand side of the webinar screen there, 8.5 is essentially a clause requirement under the quality standard, and it says production and service provision, control of production and service provision. Essentially, what control of production and service provision means, apologize for that, it means how you actually deliver your activities to your clients. So in the example that we can see here, it's a very simple example that talks about the care sector and some of the activities that actually occur within a particular care organization. And in this example, this example section of the client's manual does indicate some of the activities that should be carried out, that are expected to be carried out. And these are documented in either in a separate procedure, in a quality manual, or even in one of the processes that you've got for running your management system. Essentially, what it's telling anybody is the general instructions of how to achieve certain activities. And as I say, in this example, it's to do with care. And what you will notice there is there are some highlighted sections. So if we're carrying out an audit on this particular section, what we've chosen to do is randomly sample some of the activities that should be achieved. So as you can see there, we've got highlighted there, we've got daily notes that should be produced as a result of visiting times, for example. We've got calls being logged on a computer system and any notes being put in a service users folder. We also expect risk assessments and care plans to be in place for this particular activity. So how does that actually translate into a typical audit report? And I'm going to show you that now. We may flick back to this page just so that you can see some of those areas identified there. But let me just show you this next slide. So this is just an example of an audit report. The opening section, so the top header on there, obviously it's recording details of the audit, the things that you're looking for, and effectively the context by which you're carrying out the audit. So for this one, it's the service provision of domiciliary care. Now, the interesting part comes in the bit below where it says audit questions. And what you'll see in the left-hand column is a series of questions that effectively acts as our checklist. So before we even start the audit and actually record any notes, these questions have actually been derived from these elements that we've effectively highlighted there for our checklist. So effectively, we've generated some questions based on our process, and we're now in a position to check it. So in this example, what we've done is we've assessed what the organization should be doing, and when we've actually looked at, for example, the notes on a system, for example, we've been able to find some evidence, and the evidence that we found has actually been recorded in the right-hand column. So effectively what we've done is we've made a check of what we say we do, and we've written down what evidence that we found. And that's quite simple, isn't it? What do we say we do? This is what we've found. And you can see that replicated throughout all of those questions. So the first question talks about notes. We found some notes, and this is the notes that we found. And that would generally tell us that for this example, it's been working. Brilliant. Are the daily notes signed? So they've had a look at the evidence, and they've had a look at 3 examples of the daily notes, and they were all signed correctly. Brilliant. We can now move on to our third question, sorry. There was a, remember it said there about telephone calls in there. So we had a look there. Are we recording the telephone calls on the computer system? The computer system was accessed, and in this case, they found that the telephone call logs were being recorded. So as you can see, we're building up confirmation that what we say and expect to be done is actually being achieved. And you can see that the purpose of the audit report is to actually record the evidence that we found. And what that does is it gives you assurance that your processes are working. Now, if there was an example there where it says that we have risk assessments and we didn't have risk assessments, then we would record in there that for this particular site or for this particular engagement with a client, there wasn't a risk assessment available. And it's at that point a non-conformance may be raised. Luckily, in this case, this particular audit, everything that we expected in this particular internal audit did go according to plan, and we was able to provide evidence for it. And generally speaking, that is your audit report. That's an audit report. It's not necessarily War and Peace. It's not 40 volumes, a full-on War and Peace. It's absolutely a quick check, a spot check of what we've done. Have we expected to find certain things? Did we find those things? Yes, we did. So generally, that audit report is now complete. We've raised no non-conformances. That's it. You have now done the audit of 8.5. And essentially, when you're looking at other clauses within a particular management system that you may be going for or already have, it's a spot check of all those clauses. I hope everybody could follow that. I enjoyed doing that little bit there. So feel free to ask any questions on that, obviously, and I'll touch on it at the end. So we'll go on to a project, product, or process-based audit. Again, these are very sort of practical in terms. It often involves somebody watching things happen, making sure at each individual stage things are getting done. It absolutely looks at the paperwork that should be generated. For example, if there are certain sign-offs that need to be done, is that being done? If there are certain quality checks that need to be done, or approvals, are they being recorded as you expect them to be? Excuse me. And on the next slide, what we're going to do is I'm going to explain this in a bit more detail, because I've got a really good example that I'm sure everybody will be able to relate to. So we can effectively use this model. I mean, if anybody's seen this model before, Venn diagrams, tree diagrams, we can actually use this for a process-based approach. And for this particular example, what I'm going to do for this one is I'm going to use the manufacture of a loaf of bread. Everybody loves bread, and I certainly do. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at this diagram here, and we'll have a look at some of the key things that we can look at when a loaf of bread's produced. So, and this is in no particular order that I'm going to cover this, but essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to think if I was an organization and I was producing a loaf of bread, I'm going to need certain materials, aren't I? So first of all, what we could look at purchasing, for example. Are the purchasing processes for our flour that we're bringing in, for our seeds that we may be adding to the bread, yeast extracts, etc., liquids that may be going into that bread? Do our purchasing process make sure that we've got all these materials ready for that production run, as an example? Do we make sure that the delivery of those particular materials, that we're getting the right quantities? Because there's nothing more frustrating than expecting to produce a massive run of bread and not having the right materials or enough materials there. So you can check the purchasing function to make sure that those materials are being delivered correctly. Is the materials that are being delivered, is it at the right quality? We may order different types of flours. Have we got the right flour that we ordered? Have we got the right seeds that we need? Again, so looking at materials, you can start the journey by looking at the materials. Now, once we've got the materials, the actual flours and things are ready to go into the machines. Now, my experience of bread factories generally involve large-scale bread production. So, for example, the silos that hold the flours, the conveyor belts to deliver flours, or it might be pneumatic systems that deliver those flours into the mixers. So now we're looking at the machines, and we can say, well, have we got the machines available there? Are we producing other products on those machines? For example, is that particular weighing machine and that mixer, are they maintained correctly? Are we expecting any problems? The weighing devices will need to be calibrated. Having manufacturing equipment that requires calibration is essential for manufacturing in general, especially with like food, because you want to make sure that the right quantities are going into the right mixers, for example. So are our machines being calibrated, and are they up to date? So once we've checked that all our machines and we've checked the records that are right, what we might think of is, well, have we set up the right environment for that bread to be produced? So we've got to make sure that our emergency equipment is all up to date, as fire extinguishers, as fire call points, as smoke alarms working correctly, because effectively, if we're baking bread, we've got to make sure that our smoke alarms and emergency equipment's working. Do we have first aid equipment there ready in case somebody may get burned, for example? Do we have a clean working environment? Everybody wants a clean working environment when they're eating bread, as with any foods there. So there may be certain checks in place to make sure that emergency equipment, your environment, and your health and safety inspections have been done. So as you can see already, we're only just thinking about making the bread, and we've already looked at three sort of critical elements to the business. Now we'll get on to the absolute meat on the bones, as it were. It's effectively producing the bread. So as we are now producing the bread, the machines are whirring away. They're producing the dough, and then that dough is then being processed into loaves, and then that's going into the actual ovens. So while that's happening, we can now think about the people and also the methods, but I'm going to touch on the people for the time being. So the people that are producing that bread, for example, have they been communicated the right procedures? Do they have the necessary training to operate the mixers and the packing machines and the banding machines that may be needed before distribution? There might be a labeling machine that you have to know how to work. Are people wearing face covers and headdresses if they need that for example, in food industry? Obviously, you want to be protected. If you're working with hot things, are you wearing appropriate heat-proof gloves, for example? So we can already make a check on our people, and then that leads us nicely into the methods. So while people are producing the bread and they're operating machinery, is it a safe activity for them to do? Standard operating procedures, safe working practices, are they all in place? Have they been communicated to your staff? Are they available for staff to see, and have they been trained to them? Risk assessments and method statements are obviously a key in that as well. Making sure that we've minimized those risks to a minimal, and we're happy that it's a safe environment. The risk assessments, again, it's another method to make sure that people are working in a safe environment. People may be operating certain liquids and chemicals as part of any food production. Cost assessments may form part of that process. Are people following it? Do they understand the actual use of it? Do they understand the limitations of the use for it? Do they need breathing apparatus, for example? So these are some of the key processes and procedures and documents that you may be able to reference. Work instructions, again, do people know what to do throughout the whole life cycle of that production? And then the measurement comes into it. While that bread's being produced and while people are busy doing their activities, are there certain quality checks that need to be done? I mean, I know from experience that food production heavily involves quality checking every hour, and in some cases it might even be sooner than that. It might be every 15 minutes. Are those checks being carried out? Are they being recorded? Are those checks delivering us our expected results? Are those checks making sure that those materials and the outcomes are actually falling in within the required limits? And if not, generally, there might be some non-conformity that's in there that you as an organisation may raise. There may be non-conformities that have happened previously. So it's making sure that you're checking those particular processes more often. And then ultimately, the last part of it, once that bread's gone out to customers and they're eating that bread, are they happy with it? Are they buying more bread from that organisation? That's usually a good sign, isn't it? Do you get many complaints? Is there a particular bread product whereby it didn't do that well and you need to fine tune it, which then goes back into sort of the development of the bread and the materials? So there is a life cycle that goes on that. I hope that gives you some idea of some of the mechanisms that your organisation may use while implementing your products and services to clients. Now, I know that I've used bread as an example, but if you, for example, you look at that and take away bread and actually put my office process in there, or my new product that I'm delivering to a client, or my new machine that I'm installing for a client, you could probably use a lot of what's there to do the same thing. You know, the principles are the same, you know, whether you apply it for a project or a product or a process. And it doesn't have to be manufacturing. It can actually be within your office environment, for example, during the service delivery activity. Okay, then. Hope that everybody found some benefit from that. And we will look at actually carrying out an internal audit. So some activities, as the slide there does suggest, will encourage organisations to review the procedures of the management system and also the clauses of the management system. You may observe the processes being carried out, and the slide that I've given you before is a very good example. You know, it's not uncommon for auditors to be stood where the activity is being carried out, and that may then ask them to say, have you got a specification for that? Have you got that available to you? Have you been trained? What's your name? Right, I can have a look at your training records when I get back to the office. So by observing what's happening, you can glean a lot of information whilst you're carrying out that audit. And it may require you to go back to the offices or go to speak to other people about examination records, or even asking further questions with other people. Conversation with members of staff is a really good one. Operational control is a feature within most management system standards, and you can get a lot through conversation of whether staff generally are aware of the training, whether they've carried out the training. Staff tend to be quite honest in their approach. And again, you can absolutely get a lot of information from a member of staff, and they may allow you to then explore other avenues further. So again, those four bullet points on there are really good considerations when carrying out an internal audit. Now, again, while you're thinking about your internal audit and complete some of those activities, that might help you generate your own internal audit checklist. It might be that you can think of some activities that you should be doing as a result of speaking with people, but generally you may be able to generate some notes, and from them notes that will effectively give you a little tiny roadmap there of what you actually want to look at. If, for example, you can clarify that certain documents are available on the production floor, your checklist will inform you that, I tell you what, I need to speak with the trainer, I need to speak with the supervisor who's in the office, as an example. So again, that will help you to build up a checklist, and it will help you to identify some of the key elements that you want to look at or explore further in that current audit, or maybe even in later audits too. So some of the evidence that you may look at when carrying out audits are statements via interviews, as I identified earlier. You may be observing those activities just simply by stood there and making your own notes. There may be, as I've indicated earlier, corrective and preventative action records that indicate this is an area that we've fallen foul of before, but we're now rechecking it just to make sure that what we did earlier is working for us. You may even look at previous audit records to see whether this particular area was compliant up to this point, and it might be that it's just out of the blue why you found a non-conformance. It might be that the audit records have identified serious failures, and you may have found the same. So it's further confirming that more work needs to be done. Quality meeting records, management meeting records may be useful. Management review records. One of the key elements of implementing a management system is to undertake a performance appraisal of that management system. And you can look back over the previous 6 months, 12 months, even 24 and 36 months. Look back at those management review records, because they may give an indicator whether you've had serious errors, non-conformances, or even successes in particular area, and whether you're maintaining that successes. You may have KPI records. That might be an indicator where we're in an age now where we have electronic systems and dashboards with fancy dials and colours on there. It may be a quick, easy way to look at the KPI dashboard for customer satisfaction. Are we in the green? Are we achieving primarily what we want to achieve? Does that provide assurance to your senior management team that everything is running according to plan? And if not, what are we doing about any deviations? You can have a look at data records, for example, calibration records. It might be quality checking records over a 12-hour period. You can analyze that to see if anything's fallen out of scope in that. Business development, marketing, and sales records. What are the drivers for implementing new processes and procedures? Design and development records. So this again falls nicely in with the product development kind of audit there. How are we following that design and development process? Do we need certain activities to be completed before a product gets released to a client? In most cases, that will absolutely be required. You will need validation and verification of certain designs. Is that being achieved? Are we producing bespoke products without the client even giving us the authority? Because potentially you could be spending thousands and thousands of pounds, and actually the client says that's not what I actually wanted. So there's a lot of money gone down the drain there. So again, checking the design and development records, making sure that people are following what they should do is a key important part of any internal audit. Production and service provision records. Kind of a lot of the things that we've covered above. Checking delivery notes, checking quality checks that maybe happen online, making sure that people are putting right labels on products, for example, making sure that people are signing off certain documents or records if that's what needs to happen. Quality control records. identified above. Purchasing records. Are we getting purchase orders? Are we getting them approved? Do we have delivery notes? Are they being signed? Do we, for example, have an approved suppliers list that various people in the organization are adhering to? Do you have people buying outside of that list? Because again, without approval, that could be a check that's made and you spot it. So checking your purchasing records is an important feature. Employee training and appraisal records. We want to make sure that people can do the job and we want to make sure that they're trained. Is the training in date? Have I allocated enough training to that particular employee for the job that they're doing? Again, analysing those records and training matrices will help you to establish that. Sales receipts and supplier records sits nicely with purchasing. Management and other reports. So there may be communication reports, there may be management meetings, there may be particular communications that come out from management on a weekly basis, monthly basis. It's effectively, are they being communicated to staff and did staff have access to that information? Non-conformities and customer complaints. If you have high non-conformities, customer complaints, effectively that's going to give you an indication that you maybe need to be working harder to improve some of the processes that you're working with. It might actually need you to take a re-look at the process and actually start from scratch and implement a new process. Most organizations want to deliver their products and services without error and without any complaints from the customer. Exceeding all expectations is, I think, what a lot of organizations are aiming for. And again, if you have low numbers of complaints, generally that may allude to the fact that your customers are quite happy. And again, there are other reports and documents deemed necessary that may satisfy the 9001 standard in this case, or other standards that you operate to. So again, a lot of examples. It's not an exhaustive list, and it's certainly not an all-inclusive list. There are many different examples, and that list there will change depending on what management system there that you're looking at. Obviously, if you've got an environmental management standard, it's going to focus more on your environmental type records, things like energy and resource monitoring records, how you manage your emergency situations and environmental aspects and impacts, and so on and so on. So now that we've potentially filled out an audit and we're in a position either way to report back to management, what that audit report is effectively going to do, it's going to be a footprint of the checks that you've made on that day. And it will say various things. It will either tell you that generally things are running as expected and we don't need any corrective action, or it may identify that things aren't working as they're supposed to work and you have identified a non-conformance. And from that, you can then develop measures and plans and objectives and targets, perhaps, to circumvent any future errors or shortfalls in future. The audit report will then identify whether extra people need to be involved, whether you need any extra resources or any further development work on a particular process. Essentially, what that audit report is allowing you to do, it's allowing you to confirm that your processes are working correctly, as discussed earlier, and also that you're in compliance with the requirements from the standard at the same time. And then above everything else, once it's done, it's giving the management team and the supervisors and the business and organization generally reassurance that your processes are working as expected. And if they aren't, it's giving you reassurance that you can actually manage those and put in measures to rectify that and monitor and measure it further down the line. So again, it's installing confidence that you're doing the right things and that you can do the right things and improve things if required. And it may be that actually, as a result of doing an internal audit, you may have to revise your internal procedures. You may have to change the way that you're recording certain things. But effectively, you've gone through the activities to identify what needs to be changed. So you can focus on making those changes, implementing those changes, and hopefully sharing those changes with staff so that they're aware of what they need to do and any changes going forward. So If anybody's new to internal auditing or anybody wants to hone their skills on an internal auditing, there are several options out there for you. And one thing that the Citation ISO certification do offer is internal audit training. Now, the internal audit training offering is essentially, it can be bespoke to your organization. We do offer 1 day training, and we also offer more than that. And so the 2 or more days, again, they can be bespoke to your organization. So, for example, it can be to a small group of people. It can be to 1 or 2 individuals, or even, as I say, even a larger set of people. We can give you on a 1 day's training. What we'll generally do on there, if we're delivering internal audit training, is we will explore all the elements of the management system standard that you want us to look at with you. We'll explain that with your delegates that you've allocated for that training session, and then essentially what we will do is we'll cover various elements of the standard and how you as an organisation can implement your own audits based on your processes and procedures. When you look at 2 or more days, it does allow a bit more flexibility, because effectively we get more time with you. We can drill down in certain areas. So, for example, you might be quite confident in auditing most elements of the management system, but it may be, for example, purchasing that you're struggling with, and you want a bit more of an insights on some of the things that you can look at. And again, one of our professional consultants and auditors can come in, and we can effectively be there with your team, there to ask any questions. We can have a look at some particular avenues. We may even be able to go down onto the shop floor and do some of those activities that I spoke about earlier. So the internal audit training offering that we do have, it can be bespoke there. And I mean, if anybody is interested in that, we do cover 9001 for quality, environment, health and safety, and also information security. If anybody is interested, there is the email address there, and I think my moderator put that email address right at the beginning in the comments, I think, there. So if anybody is interested in exploring that further, please don't hesitate to get in touch with marketing and through that email there, and they will obviously assist and help you generate a quote, and they will hopefully address your needs through that. Now, one other offering that we also have, it's the ISO Mentor Program. And the ISO Mentor Program is particularly useful for organizations where they may not be able to get all the staff in a room at all one time. They may not be able to get the availability of staff, or maybe only able to get 1 member of staff available. So what the ISO Mentor allows organizations to do is to effectively sign into a package whereby we have got training material based on all of the key areas of the standard. So we look at some of, as the bullet points there allude to, we look at context of the organization, interested parties, leadership, responsibility, risks and opportunities. And these are broken down into manageable chunks. So effectively, if you was looking at a quality management system and you thought, oh, I'd like to explore this, we will effectively help to deliver a training package that covers all the key elements of the standard. It can be a classroom environment there where people essentially log on and they sign up to this, and there are certain dates that are set for these particular activities. So it's, you know, if Monday you can't make it, there may be an available date on a Thursday. So I think that fits very well with organizations that don't, you know, that have employees who may have some availability, but it's limited. That will absolutely suit their need as well. It's generally a 1-hour training session, and it's delivered by one of my colleagues who's an expert in ISOs, and he will effectively be able to sit with you if you have questions. If you want to explore certain things within there, there's a certain element of interactivity about that as well. They're very, very, very good sessions, and they're very good for all members of staff, no matter what level of they are. And the bonus with the ISO Mentor Program, to be honest, is if you sign up for it as an organization, I think at the moment you are able to sign up many employees. You're not you pay generally one fixed cost, and you can put as many employees on that. However, I think the amount of people will be changing in the very near future. So if anybody's even thinking about this now, it's worth getting in touch with marketing just to have that conversation, because it's a very good program. The consultant who delivers it is an absolute expert. Is really good at what he does, and I think a lot of organisations will get a lot of benefit from that too. Okay. So sorry, I forgot to put this slide on there. Some of the benefits of that ISO Mentor: it is live. You can access it at any at several points, and again, you can register many employees on that for the same cost. You're not paying any more than your initial fee there. The courses are repeated regularly, so if you miss it on a Monday, you can have a look on the diary and have a look on the calendar. Oh, I can see that there's another one there that repeats. You may just want to look at certain elements to it, so you can pick and choose the elements that you want to do and what order you want to do it in. It is of high quality, and as I say, it's delivered by an expert there. And again, as I said there, you can use that there as an ongoing training. So even though I may have done some training in January, if I think, oh, I love that training, but I've not remembered absolutely everything, I can go back onto that training, even though I've already done it. So again, that is some of the benefits there of ISO Mentor. It fits nicely within most businesses, and also within the sort of the time frames and activities, the busy lives that the employees have within there. And finally, there are some useful links that have been added to the webinar slides there. So also my moderator, as I said there, she added some contact details in there at the beginning of the chat. Feel free to explore any of the ISO links that you've got on there. And what I would like to do is I would like to now open the floor out to any questions that we have. So if you just bear with me there, my moderator is busy beavering away on questions. So, Olga, thank you very much for this question. How to decide what type of audit my company needs? It'd be useful I mean, essentially, you can choose the approach that you want. It would also be, Olga, if it's okay, would it be okay to put in whether you've got an existing management system or not? Just out of interest. I mean, generally, organisations can decide which type of audit that they want. The clause-based approach generally goes from the start of the standard to the end, and you step through it, and you effectively plan that audit, and you just, for example, you look at your organization and its general context first. Then you might look at leaderships and policies. Then you might look at how your risks and opportunities are managed. So in chronological order, if your audit team likes to do that, and they're very much sort of standard based, then a system audit is the one that you want. If you're a manufacturing company, it might be that you do a product or process based approach. It might be that you've actually set up your management system in a process based approach. Then essentially all you're going to do is audit your formal processes and procedures and make sure that you essentially are then covering all the elements of the standard through those procedures. Feel free to ask any additional questions on that, Olga, because I know that can be as wide as it is long, essentially there. But feel free to ask any more if you want me to dive into that any further. Mohammed, thanks for this question. What is the recommended frequency of internal audits of a quality management system? Now, this is a fantastic question and a valid one that sort of comes up during any implementation. So, depending on your organization and what you decide, it will determine the frequency. Now, a lot of organizations will, for example, cover all of the clauses from the management system. So if I just make it very general, Section 4 to Section 10 is essentially where the standard requirements are identified in a 9001 management system. So if I was auditing the 9001, I would have to audit the whole of clause 4, the whole of clause 5, whole of clause 6, all the way through to clause 10. And what a lot of organizations do, they'll spread that over the period of a 12 month. So for example, they may audit clause 4 in January. In February, they may audit the whole of clause 5 in January. In February, and in March they may audit clause 6 and so on. So this goes back to that matrix whereby they're actually auditing the entirety of each clause over every month of the year. Now, as I said earlier, there may be a need there for you to spread that over a longer period of time. Generally speaking, it's within how we generally operate things at Citation ISO certification. We expect a minimum for the whole of the quality management system or environmental management system to be done at the very most, at the very most over a 3-year period. But more often than not, it is actually done over a 12-month period because, again, busy organizations might have more factors that can go wrong over a 12-month period. So it's almost like an annual check. And it will mean that essentially there is an internal audit being carried out in your organization at least once every month. That might be, it might be one day a month. It might only be a morning a month, but essentially it's your audit plan will determine the full plan itself, and you can decide whether that's staggered or not. Now, what I will say is as well, Mohammed, when organizations, experienced organizations or people that are experienced in implementing it, some people actually choose to do that audit over the course of 1 week. So they'll just choose February every year and they'll cover the management system audit. The better that you get at it, the more efficient you'll become at it, the less time that generally it will take you. So as somebody who's starting the journey, spread it out. Somebody who's very experienced and getting consistent results, it might be that you can actually reduce the plan over the year and reduce it, to maybe 1 or 2 months of the year. I hope that answers your question, but certainly over a 12-month period, at the very maximum, the whole of it over a 3-year period. But it is up to the organization to define it. And yeah. Hopefully that's answered there. Please feel free to ask any more questions. Christina, thanks for this one. Would a copy / example of an audit schedule be available? If you mean as a result of this webinar, I've not been asked to produce one. However, within the webinar, if you just think of an Excel worksheet or a table, for example, and put January to in fact, if you think of an Excel worksheet, January to December across horizontally across the top, and then put clause 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 as an example down the left-hand column, that could be a start for your internal audit schedule. I would have to check with my moderator to see whether I had a typical audit schedule that could be provided to anybody that requests it afterwards. But yeah, quite a surprising question because I've never been asked that before. So thanks for that one. I will ask my moderator, and my moderator will confirm to me whether we can perhaps send one as a result of the when the webinar is completed, when we send the slides out, for example. So I don't see any objections to it, to be honest, but yeah, good question. And if I can provide one, I certainly will. And it will only be a basic one, but it will give people an idea of how they can plan an audit out typically. Mohammed, thanks for this question, and I appreciate you getting back to me on this one. For any process audit, can this be done by reviewing the relevant procedure and speaking to the person involved, using this process, asking questions, instead of physically observing the relevant person doing the process activities? If you decide through conversation that you can check that procedure and that person is going to give you reliable or honest results, then I don't see why not. Because you're actually drawing from their experience. But you have got a consideration there that they may be telling you what you want to hear. And I think you've got to be mindful of that as an auditor. Although we like to believe that our people are going to be honest and truthful, sometimes, through excitement, through just wanting to do the right thing, you may actually just get the answers that you're looking for without actually the proof in the pudding. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. When I was new to manufacturing, for example, I may or may not have made a few mistakes. Now, even being at a young age, would I have necessarily owned up to them mistakes? Well, as a young person, certainly I'd have been very conscious that I didn't want to seem to be doing the wrong thing. So that's the danger that you've got. If you actually observe those activities, you can actually see it in real time. And that's, for me, that's proof in the pudding, isn't it? So you can to a certain extent, but I wouldn't rely on it through the entirety of your audit. Okay. That is my honest answer. Christina, brilliant. Thank you very much for this one again. Could we use an external auditing program to carry out our audits? For example, iAuditor. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, it is up to your organization how you carry the audits. I think if you think in principle there, if when you're using whatever system you may be using, if that is recording your internal audit, it's recording the program, it's recording the activities that you're looking for, and it confirms that you're covering all those lovely clauses of the audits or your internal audit processes. When, for example, citation ISO certification comes in as an external auditor and looks at your organization, what we're looking for is records that those audits have been done and that you're covering the either your processes or the management system standard. If you produce those records on screen via iAuditor via an iPad, as long as you've got those records and you're recording it, that's proof in the pudding again, isn't it? So effectively, how you record it is entirely up to you, as long as you've got access to those results when you're not only internally auditing yourself, but when we come in and check from as a certification body, we're coming in and check that you're compliant to the standard. So yes, you can use that as long as again you're covering all elements of the standard. I love these questions from Christina. You're my star attendee today, so thanks for this. As part of the QMS, do we need to audit each of the services we provide in addition to the external processes and procedures? Well, again, I mean, that could be almost depending on what you do. If you deliver thousands and thousands of different services to clients, it's going to be absolutely impossible to audit every single service. I think what you should be focusing on there is if you provide a service, it's how are you doing the necessary elements according to the standard. So when you think of a service that you provide, that is generally the outcome, isn't it? So before even that happens, if you're providing something to a client, you are going to need, for example, to know, have we got an inquiry from that? Have we got the necessary documents in there? It's almost like looking at the processes that deliver the actual services rather than the individual services themselves, if that makes any sense. If you look at it holistically, so look at it, pretend you're looking above your organization, you're looking it down. So how you deliver your products and services to clients is going to almost be very, very similar. The actual individual, what product and what services goes out to those clients, it may be different, but generally the end result is going to be the same. You're going to have a need for a product or a service. You're going to have to cost for that service, provide quotations for that particular service. The client's going to have to come back to you and say, yes, we want that. You're going to have to either produce, manufacture, deliver that service. And I suppose that one of the key elements, once you've delivered it, is the client satisfied with it? Are they willing to pay you for it now that you've delivered it? So those are the basic principles. You may, if it's a massive organization and you've got millions and millions, like you wouldn't necessarily audit the fact that you've got 1,000 grommets, different types of grommets going out to all different suppliers or clients. It's the fact that you're actually sending these grommets out to clients rather than the actual individual ones to themselves. I hope that makes sense as well, Christina. Thank you, Kevin. Is there a requirement for an audit to be trained with recognized certificate? Very, very good question. So essentially that there is a need for auditors to have some insights into what they need to be doing. So any training will absolutely do. For example, I've already mentioned the internal audit, the IAT training, the internal audit training, and I've also mentioned the ISO mentor program. Now, there is a lot of information within those types of offerings that will allow your organization's potential internal audits to be trained and to understand what's going on. I mean, I think if you're a large organization and you want to go for recognized certificates, or individuals may want to, there's nothing wrong with exploring that and going for those recognized certificates. Any formal qualifications like that can only help your organizations. I mean, if you think of one of the basic principles that I discussed when we looked at an audit report, and I love doing this, when we have an audit, we look at what we say we do, what is it that we've found, and I mean I've broken it down to the most basic elements possible. And if you can, number one, read and essentially understand processes and read what you're doing and understand it, you can actually identify what the organization does and you can report on them actual audit findings. I mean that's what I tell a lot of my clients in the basic principle. Obviously, there's more nuances within internal auditing, but if you can understand that basic principle there, what do we say we do? Well, let's have a look at its processes and procedures. Right, it says that we do A, B, C, and D. Right, can you make a check that A, B, and C, D is happening? We write down that evidence to say that what we found when we've looked at A, B, and C. And again, that is the basic principle. You can use that principle to look at your internal processes, procedures, documents, and even a management system standard is effectively built on that principle. I hope that answers your question, Kevin. I mean, again, feel free to explore, ask any more questions, or even explore the marketing email and ask any more questions through them, because I'm sure our marketing team can provide some additional marketing information about the ISO mentor program and even the IAT, if that'll help you any further. Zenodia, I'm hoping that I've got that right. Forgive me if I haven't, but Zenodia, appreciate your question there. In the process of conducting an internal audit and analysing customer complaints, love this question already. Is it good practice to reach out to the customer to check constant reporting? Well, I think if, for example, if you're analysing customer complaints and, for example, there is a trend there and it's related to the reporting of it, then why not? I think some organisations, what they do is if they get a complaint, I know particularly in food industries, if they get a complaint from a customer, that complaint, somebody literally either picks up the phone and emails that customer or gets back in touch with that customer to see and investigate what that issue is, so that it helps improve that product going forward. If you've got time to do that, and for example, it's within your business activities, and you don't mind doing that, it's definitely not a bad thing to do, isn't it? Sometimes even a customer complaint, somebody might write a customer complaint and it might only be very vague in nature, but it actually conveys that customer's not satisfied. You may need to pick up that phone, email them, or get in touch with that customer and actually deep dive into why is that complaint? Is there anything that we can do to turn that complaint around, for example? So I think it is good to reach out to the customer, particularly if you've got trends, if you've got commonality in the same customer complaint that's been reported. For example, I've received a box and it's damaged. Oh, crumbs. I've received 10 boxes in the last 10 days. They've all been damaged. Why? How come I'm getting damaged boxes? That is, again, it's a good way of absolutely asking what the complaint is. And it might help you to get down to the root cause of that to prevent them complaints from happening. I wouldn't necessarily get in touch with a customer while I'm carrying out an internal audit. I'd actually do the audit, find out where the bottlenecks are or where the issues are. And if that then gives you reason to then explore and go further and get in touch with those customers, then so be it. Yeah, I think you'll probably find you might be you're running out of time, or it might affect some of your timings if you start phoning customers up when you're when you're doing an internal audit. But certainly what you might say is, as a result of doing an internal audit on customer satisfaction, you might say to yourself, well, absolutely, next Monday, what I'm going to do is I'm going to section 2 hours of my working time next Monday, and I'm going to phone up 10 of my customers to see what else I can find, because you're actually following up on a potential non-conformance or a complaint. So yeah, I think it is good practice, but just be careful that you're not inundated with just phoning people up. Thank you. Oh, we've got another one there from Mohammed. Is there any criteria to classify non-conformance major, minor, or critical for 9001? Right. Okay. Then, I mean, if you can look in the management system standard, and it will tell you that. I think if anybody's an existing client of Citation ISO certification, when you get your audit reports from us, the top section do classify a major and a minor, but I will clarify it generally now. So a major non-conformance is a non-conformance when there has been a critical failure in your system. So, and if that critical failure, for example, may cause a collapse of the management system, I know that's extreme, or for example, if that critical failure is, for example, it's happened previously and nothing's been done about it, generally a non-conformance like that is a major. And I'm going to give you an example now. If organizations are doing 9001 and they've got the management system standard, if they don't carry out management review and internal audits and they don't document them, that's a major fail, because it's a requirement of the standard. There's a reason for it obviously being there, and it's a critical element to make sure that you're compliant to the standard. So that's a major non-conformance. A minor non-conformance might be an error or something that's gone wrong, but doesn't necessarily have a knock-on effect. So, for example, if I've got a document and it's not up to date and it's not may have not been used in the last 3 months, chances are, if it's not been used in the last 3 months, we've spotted it that it needs to be updated, but it's not necessarily causing a collapse or major calamity. Another minor non-conformance might be that although we've got training records in there, it might be that an internal training record has gone out of date. Robert was supposed to be trained on a machine, for example, on Monday, and we're now on Wednesday and he hasn't been trained. You know, the time between Monday and Wednesday is only short, but essentially you've spotted that actually Robert should have had his refresher training on Monday and hasn't done. That'd be a minor non-conformance. So things that don't necessarily cause major or knock-on effects or critical failures would be a minor, but the majors are the real headbangers, the ones where you're not fully conforming to the standard, you're not meeting the requirements. In fact, another good example of a major non-conformance is if you have a RIDDOR reportable accident and you haven't reported it to the HSE as a RIDDOR within the timeframes given, because the reason why you'd raise that as a major is because generally you're not compliant to legal requirements. So that, again, any areas there where legally you find yourself you're not compliant operationally, if it's not been done, generally a major non-conformance will be raised. It's all about switching those light bulbs onto your whole team and saying, look, if we don't get on this and manage this properly and put in effective corrective action, something big could happen, whether it's, it affects your reputation, costs, maybe the HSE comes in and has to walk around your factory. So that, again, anything that's critical that'll create a major disturbance within your organization generally be a non-conformance. Thanks, Mohammed, for that question. Very good question. Michelle, thank you for this one. If we do an internal audit in preparation for an external audit, I like this one, how would we know what the external audit wants to look at? Might be different. Okay, then I'm going to give you some very straightforward advice. An external auditor will generally come in and certainly from where I'm sitting, I tend to look at sample from the full entirety of the management system. So I would generally expect that they're going to look at not absolutely everything, but they're going to look at like context of the organization. They're going to look at how leadership's done. They're going to look at your policy. And again, if you've set up your management system in a clause-based approach, those are all effectively titled, defined by that management system standard. If we come in and we have a quality manual, effectively, what we'll do is we'll ask you, Michelle, for your quality manual, and that quality manual will step us through all the key elements of your management system that shows how you expect that management system to be implemented. And effectively, what we'll do is we'll use that manual and we will make references to that manual. Remember that example that I showed you on screen about that 8.5 for the care industry, the domiciliary care? That was a segment of the manual, and that's what allows us to step through and check on what you do as an organization. So my advice to yourself, Michelle, and anybody there, if you are currently running a management system and you're due for an audit, make sure you step through your manual yourself, make sure that it's relevant, make sure it's up to date and contains all the right information. Because as an auditor, we don't want to be asking you questions that are not what you do. We're expecting to, obviously, we're there to audit for compliance. So we're expecting to see what you say you do matches. And if, for example, there are mismatches in the manual, we will identify that for you and we'll say, that's not exactly what you do. And you might go, well, yeah, you're right, Rob, that's not what we do. We need to change our manual to reflect what we do. Jobs are good, and that's the way forward, isn't it? I may raise a minor or a major on that one, depending on the severity of it, but essentially, it's switching your light bulb on to say that you need to adjust your internal manual or processes to suit what you do, so that when you internally audit it, you can then follow what you do. It's almost like a little life cycle going on, isn't it? What are the costs for audit training? Good question, Dion. And what I'm going to do for that one strategically, I'm going to pass that over to my moderator. And I think, Dion, I think my moderator will have your details, and what my moderator will do is they'll ensure that somebody contacts you about that, just for discussion, if that's okay. I'm sorry I can't give you that now, but it's out of my hands. I prefer the team in the background to do that for me, if that's acceptable. But thanks for the question there, Dion. And if anybody else again wants to show interest in that, feel free to get in touch with that the marketing the marketing email. I think it's in the comments. I think at the beginning of our question. Yeah, we've got it in there. marketing@qmsuk.com. Now, incidentally, as I say, these slides will be sent out, and the webinar will be posted for anybody else. There we go. They'll be included on there. There'll be some links there. And when the moderator arranges for the webinar slides and also the webinar itself, the video, that'll all be posted, and every attendee will be sent confirmation of that, so they'll be able to access this information. And as I said, if anybody does want any further information in terms of costs or training, please don't hesitate to get in touch. We've got a fantastic team behind us, and they'll certainly be able to accommodate anybody's inquiries on that. Any more questions? Thick and fast today. We absolutely love it. Any more questions from my moderator? I think I'm just looking in there. I think that's it. Right, I'm going to take that there is no more questions. In fact, I'll give everybody 5 seconds. Any more questions? Brilliant. Right. If there are no more questions, I just want to thank everybody for attending. I know that it's run over slightly longer than normal there, but we've had a lot of questions, and I think it's been really useful, to be honest. We will be sending out the slides of the webinar and the actual, obviously, the presentation as well. But my moderator will be sorting that in the background. And I just want to say thanks ever so much for attending. And please feel free to join any of the other webinars in the future. We love doing this for our clients, and again, I think it's a great way to sort of share some of my experience as an auditor and a consultant, and also to share some of the offerings that we've got there for you, because everything that we have on offer for you it's generally for your benefit, so that you can get the maximum out of your management systems. Okay then. Well, if there isn't anything more, I just want to thank everybody one last time. Have a great, fabulous weekend, and I look forward to any of you attending my next webinar. You take care. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.